What is going on, guys? I'm gonna apologize for my voice. I'm getting over head cold currently, but we are back to working on the Jeep. Took this thing out on some local trails down by the river, and I kept getting this sensation, almost like, best way to explain it is that the rear end was loose and kind of wandering back and forth. It was also kind of making a noise anytime the weight would shift from one side to the other. So we're gonna diagnose exactly what's going on with this thing and see if we can get it fixed. So the first step was just to come in, look at the rear end, look at all my shock mounts, my springs, my control arms, especially the bushings in those. Sway bar, but specifically this track bar here. So this runs from here all the way up. This is what keeps that axle from moving side to side. So I inspected that, everything looked good. So move out to the wheels and see if I can recreate the problem. So like I said, when this weight shifted side to side, it's when I'd hear the noise and kind of feel that sensation. So if you see, if I grab a hold of this wheel, you can see there's some in play. That is definitely not supposed to do that. So I'm not sure if this will show up on camera or not, but it's both sides. There's definitely play in the rear axle bearings on this thing. So when we pull this thing apart, if our oil level is correct, you actually have oil in your axle tubes, so it would run out. So I just want to go ahead to start off. I'm going to drain this rear differential just so I don't make a mess when I pull the axles out. Here's our fill plug. Here's our drain plug right there. Now, I always recommend you take the fill plug out first, just in case, for whatever reason, if you couldn't get it out, you don't want to drain that fluid out and then be stuck. The first step is simply to remove the wheel. Next thing, we need to remove this caliper. So that's these two bolts here. With our two caliper bolts removed, simply remove the caliper and just hang it up here out of the way. Now these calipers are a little unique. They have to come out from the bottom first. It's got this spring in here. So we'll just simply pry the bottom out, and the whole thing will come off. Next, we're just going to pull our rotor. And these actually use inside brake shoes for the parking brake. And it looks like this one is gone, so that's something I'm going to need to look into, get some new shoes. Okay, now there is a backing plate behind this. It holds the whole thing in. So we've got this hole here. If we spin it around, you can see we've got 4 nuts on the back of it. So there's one. Spin it all the way back around this way. There's one. And then there is our final one. These are 14 millimeter, so we're just gonna need to get an extension and a socket to get in and loosen all 4 of those and take those off. So now that we've got the 4 backing plate nuts removed, this thing will come out. Now, sometimes you're able to just grab a hold of it and pull it out. You can hear all that play. This one, not able to, so we're gonna get a slide hammer on it. So I rented this one from O'Reilly's. It doesn't quite fit the lug pattern on the Jeep, but these usually don't take much to pop out. So I've just got 2 lug nuts in it. Now I don't want to get crazy because I'll end up messing up these threads, but like I said, these usually aren't too bad. And this thing, I'll just slide it down, see if we can get it to pop. And there it goes. So this one actually has aftermarket bearings in it already. These are what they call axle savers. They're just a little bit wider. They're not a tapered bearing. But the problem with these is this whole thing is sealed. So there is no way for the oil to get back into the bearing. They're just counting on the grease that's in that bearing from new to keep that thing lubricated. And clearly, they didn't do a very good job. So to get these off, we need to cut both of these. Now, I find it easier to go ahead and cut the outer part off the bearing. I'll cut it on this side, I'll rotate it around, cut it again so it splits in half. All the bearings will come out, go everywhere, but then that allows me to get my retainer off as well as the bottom piece of the bearing that is on the shaft itself. Then of course the seal just slides right off, the backing plate just slides right off. So you might have seen there, once it went, it just exploded. I've got bearings everywhere, but we got the first part done. So next, I'm going to cut into the retainer. Now when you're doing this, you just want to be really careful not to get down to the shaft. You want to cut this as close as you can without actually going through. So I don't know if you can see, I've got a groove cut in this, but not down to the shaft. I don't want to damage that. So now let's try to hit this with a chisel, see what happens. So you can see I just kept cutting, hit it a little more. If it didn't go, I'd keep going. But the important part is I didn't get into the shaft. Now I need to do the exact same thing with that inner part of the bearing. Okay, there we got them all. And we stayed out of, didn't nick the shaft at all. So it's awesome. Now we can get this one taken apart. Okay, now we are ready to install the new bearings. Now, you're going to need a press to put these bearings on. There's a lot of videos out there, so I'm not going to cover that. I'm just going to go ahead and get these bearings put on, and then we'll go back to the installation process. If you don't have a press, then you can take them to a local shop a lot of times and pay them, and they'll do it for you. But once again, if you're interested in that, there's a bunch of videos out there that cover that. I'll throw a couple links down in the description below of videos that do cover that. But for time's sake, we're going to skip right past that, come back with new bearings on these, install them back into the Jeep. So here we've got our new seal, bearing, and retainer, both axles. Now one thing I will say is I went through a bunch of different brands of bearings that I was just getting from auto parts stores that were all garbage. I tried Precision, I tried a National, I tried a couple house brands from the different auto parts stores. All of them, you could literally take the bearing brand new and it would have play up and down. Where if we look at these are actually Spicer bearings. So I just went back with the factory ones. I mean, that thing has no play, hardly at all, up and down. And that's what we want. That was the problem we were trying to fix to start with. Now, if we would have used one of those other brand bearings, this probably would have had the exact same problem when I put the new bearings on and put them back in the vehicle. So I really recommend you just go back with the Spicer bearings if you do this job. Another thing to keep in mind is I had marked which shaft came out of which side because they are specific. The shorter shaft is the driver's side. Now, they're not much difference, but the passenger side is just a touch longer than the driver's side is. So keep that in mind. Now we just have to get our shaft slid back in, our 4 nuts holding that backing plate on, and we can start getting this thing put back together. One thing I do recommend before you start putting this thing back together, to make sure just to clean all this surface up, just so your new bearing, your new seal has the best chance of not leaking and making you know, the best contact that we can with everything in here. There's not going to be any debris riding around in there, so we're going to get that cleaned up. We've got the axle slid back in here. Just gonna go back and put my 4 nuts back on. These things torque down to 45 foot-pounds. Another thing I'll do is I'll put just a little bit of blue Loctite on these when I put them back on. Now when we tighten these down, I'm gonna go in an X pattern. So I'm gonna go bottom, top, bottom, top. Just so as you tighten it down, it's even. You don't want to get one side tightened all the way down, the other side still being loose. All right, we got these things all torqued down. Spins freely. There's no play. That's how it's supposed to be. Now we're going to throw our rotor back on, caliper, tighten everything down, wheel back on, and we're done. Now the only thing left is go take this thing for a test drive, make sure everything's good. If you guys liked this video, found it helpful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys next time.